All right, in our last space cast on welding, we talked about duty cycle. Okay, we know that duty cycle is a percentage of time, 10 minutes, that the welding machine can be operated at its load capacity, and we don't want it to exceed those component parts. Okay, really important. All right, so we also need to remember that we have required welding equipment when we stick weld. Okay, workpiece connection and lead. When they talk about workpiece connection, they're talking about the ground. Okay. We need an electrode holder and a lead. When we say electrode holder, that can also be called a stinger. Okay, so we can have welding leads or grounds that are clamps or removable or pinchy kind, what have you. Okay, but we're also going to need specific equipment. We need a chipping hammer and a wire brush. We also need to make sure that we're using our PPE. We need to make sure that we're using our ventilation system. So make sure your hood is as close to you as you can to remove the smoke. Personally, smoke is really important for it to be ventilated, not just for your lungs, but for your hearing. And I will personally attest to this. I tend to weld with the smoke in my face and not wear earplugs. And the problem is that we have these little hairs in our ear that help us hear. And maybe if you go to a loud concert or hear a lot of loud things, those hairs in your ear actually start to lay down. And it kind of mutes everything, or you have ringing in your ears. Okay? But after a while, they kind of prop back up. They kind of come back to life. Well, what happens is when we're welding in the fumes, those little fume particles actually kind of stick to those hairs and make those hairs lay down. The problem is that if you continue to do it, it damages those hairs, so those hairs don't come back up. So it's really important to keep your head out of the fumes, okay? Make sure you're using your screens. Make sure you guys are using your welding glasses. It's really important. You need to be safe. All right, we also want to make sure you have a properly shaded helmet, okay? The ones that you guys get from the school are usually about shade 10. You guys can also get an auto darkening one, but you need to make sure that it is at minimum shade 10. If you have light blue or lighter eyes, or if you have issues with the sun, you need to make sure that you get the darkest lens as possible to protect your eyes, okay? You also need to make sure that you're wearing something on your arms. You don't want any spatter. Make sure you guys are wearing jeans and boots, and make sure that you don't have any cuffs on your pants because we don't want any sparkles going in there. All right, we also want to wear eye protection. We got this. Okay, now, points to remember. The heat used for stick is generated from an arc, and the electricity jumps across that gap. That gap is called what? Arc length, okay? When it gets hot enough, it melts not only our rod, but it also melts our base material. All right, NEMA has set a standard for duty cycle based on a 10-minute period. The duty cycle expresses the operation time that a welding machine may be used at its rated load without exceeding the temperature of the insulation of the component parts, okay? Remember this will be on the test. We also want to make sure that we keep our leads orderly. Whenever we come into a booth, you guys need to make sure that your leads are plugged in. You also want to make sure that they're not kinked, bent, cut, melted, or anything like that because you can get hurt if it's a bare wire. All right, we want to make sure that we use the properly sized welding leads to prevent voltage drop. When we talk about this means that it's kind of like the hose thing. So I have a 50-foot hose and I turn it on at the faucet and just a little trickle. By the time I get down to the end of the hose, there's not going to be much left. Okay, there's just going to be a little trickle. Well, that's the same thing as not having appropriately sized welding leads. We want to make sure that we have leads that are going to be able to carry the current. So if I have a 100-foot lead and I turn the current on at 150 amps, by the time it gets to the end of there, I might only have 100 amps. So I need to make sure that when I do turn up the current to get the appropriate amperage at the end, that my lead is going to be able to carry it, okay? We want to make sure that we pay attention to our environment. Pay attention to the people around you. You need to make sure that you are not only safe for yourself, but other people around you. Believe me that when you guys go into the real world and go into a shop, if you don't pay attention to your surroundings, a lot of guys will not tolerate it and they will say, hit the road, Jack. Okay? We also want to make sure that the electrode holder is completely insulated. Why? Well, we want to protect ourselves, okay? We also want to make sure that we have adequate ventilation. All right, as always, take care and we'll have questions for discussion next.